are hanging baskets so popular? They've grown in popularity to hang at doors as a cheery welcome to guests. And you don't even have to hang them at doors. You can hang them, this is at my front door actually, only it's at my gate at the side of the house. So it's not even hanging at normal hanging basket height. I always think it's such a shame you never get to see the top plants if they're hung too high. So I've got mine hanging on a gate post, but you can get them, hang them anywhere you want to. And you can even get those lovely hook over ones that you can put over fences. So summer hanging baskets, they're colourful and bright, and compared to growing in the soil or in a raised bed or on an allotment, they're relatively simple to care for. And summer flowering plants are commonly used for the display. You can also grow salad crops and fruit in hanging baskets. Here we've got rocket growing, tumbling tomatoes, and we've got strawberries growing in a hanging basket as well. Herbs do well in hanging baskets also. Now, summer bedding is a really common sight in public places, and they're favoured by, you know, like the councils as well as homeowners to bring colour to our own gardens and public spaces. So summer bedding is a plant that lasts for only 1 year compared to many perennial plants and shrubs that grow in our gardens year on year. Summer bedding is put into a flower bed before it flowers, and it is then removed once it has finished flowering. And you'll see that commonly in council roundabouts and places like that. Bedding plants are generally annual plants which complete their life cycle in one season. So they'll germinate as a seed growing into a flower, late winter, early spring, flowering all summer. They will then produce seeds, which ordinarily very few people collect, but you can collect them if you want to. And then they'll die completely off at the end of autumn, and that's then completed their growing cycle. So a wee bit of history about bedding plants. They were discovered, let's say, and brought back to our countries during the Victorian era, when specialist plant hunters were dispatched by these wealthy folks to bring back new eye-catching plants that grew ordinarily in other countries where it was a wee bit warmer. So they were brought back to add instant colour and decoration to their bask gardens, with the aim of showing off that they were the best in the county. Their gardens were the best. So the aim of being the envy of their peers. And of course, since then, you know, like everything, as things were, as the wealthy normalised it, we started to filter down through the wealth brackets, to the point where nowadays bedding plants are relatively cheap to buy, and most people will have a go at growing them. And as I've mentioned, council displays, most councils still put on quite a formal display every summertime, and I've seen our bulbs getting lifted out in our local council parks, so that'll be them getting ready for their summer displays to go in. And of course, smaller displays are equally effective, and Emma's going to be demonstrating how to do our own display in a hanging basket. So sighting hanging baskets, you know, I've just mentioned I have mine sitting attached to a fence post. So the trailing plants don't actually hit the ground, but I really like it because I get to see it all of it and on view. If you have it sighted higher up, just be aware that people won't bump their head off it. So just be aware of where you locate it, that it's not going to be problematic. But equally, have it sighted so that it can be tended to. Here's a drawing of a hanging basket bracket. The bracket itself, the arm, is long enough so that the basket can hang and not hit off the wall. There's enough space there so that the plants that are cascading over the side don't get battered, because it's windy up there, and the basket will sway in the breeze a little bit, so we don't want it to rock. Equally, my parents actually do this. My dad has now got a chain that he hangs from the hanging basket hook, hanging basket bracket hook, It hangs down and he then attaches the chain of the basket onto the dangling chain, and it just makes it easier for him to water into. That's the reason that he does that, actually. So there's lots of way of adapting how we site the baskets to make them even more accessible to help our care for the baskets. And of course, be creative. Emma's going to be creative just shortly, but here's some images of baskets that have been made over the years. And when you're choosing your plants, consider the visual impact, you know, do you want them to be bright and sunny? The mood that you're trying to create, colour does impact on the mood that you're trying to create, and the aspect. If it's in a sunny aspect, choose plants that will grow in sunny places. If it's in the shade, go for things like the one in the right-hand side here. It's got verbena and fuchsias in it. Fuchsias and verbena both do well in semi-shade. And of course, be creative. This is my friend's hanging basket. This was an old wicker basket that was getting flung out of a relative's house that she and her husband attached to a tree and fill with basket plants, summer bedding plants. So there you go. Be big and bold with your hanging baskets. And of course, we don't have to do displays in baskets. You can have them in pots. Here's a very sunny yellow one, and another one that's quite dramatic with a red cordyline and red and white flowers. And Emma's going to inspire us. Lots of inspiration for container pots and baskets can be found in many books. And have a wee rumble through charity shops. There's always loads of books in there to inspire also. And there we have it. I'm going to stop sharing now and hand over to Emma. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, John. Nice to see everybody. I am going to head over to my tabletop now. So I'll see you over there. Right, somebody has just started mowing their lawn outside. I hope you can't hear it.
No, it's fine, Emma. And sorry, before you start, Emma, I'm just going to mention, I didn't say to folks, if you've got any questions, please pop them into the chat and we'll put them to Emma at the end of the session. Thanks.
Great. So today, as Joan mentioned, we're going to have a go at making a nice, simple but effective summer hanging basket. So I have got this basket here, which is the same one that I used last year. It's one of these sort of metal framed ones, and you put a liner inside it. The liners do kind of eventually wear away a little bit, but you can make them last a little bit longer if you cut out a circle of plastic, maybe from an old compost bag, and put it in the middle. That can also help with stopping the basket from draining out too quickly as well. So this is a basket I had last year, and the liner is still in pretty good condition, so I'm quite happy to use it as it is. And what I usually do, and this is quite helpful if people are going to struggle with balancing this, is I get a pot, quite a large, so this is quite a sort of medium-sized or large pot, not a little pot. And you can put the hanging basket on top, and that will kind of hold it so that when you're working on it, it's not rolling around the table. So that's just a little tip for you. So I've got a different selection of plants today, and Joan and Trellis have come up with some catchy names for them all, for the types of plants that we want to use. But one thing I would say is, if you go to your local garden centre, or sometimes even a little small shop near where you live, you'll be able to find plants that will work for a hanging basket. And quite often garden centres by now will have a section that's dedicated to hanging baskets and containers. So most of the plants that I have with me today, I have picked up just from my local garden centre in the hanging basket section. So this is a pelargonium, what used to be called a geranium. It did have a lovely flower on it, but it's starting to lose it already. So what I'm going to be doing is pinching it out, because there are some lovely new flowers already on their way. And I'm going to use that for the center of the hanging basket. So we call these the thriller plants because they're the kind of one in the middle that will give us a big sort of flower and will grow up a bit taller so you can see them above the top of the basket. So that's the sort of thriller plant, and I've got one of those. And then I've chosen some plants that we are calling spiller plants. So these are the ones that, well, you'll be able to see this one is doing it already. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's starting to hang over the edge. This is a glaucoma. So you can get lots of different plants that do this kind of trailing thing. And I'm sure you can kind of imagine how once it's over the basket, that will look lovely. And this one's fab. I've grown this in baskets before. I can add the full name in the chat afterwards, but it grows, you know, sometimes like half a meter. The foliage can just keep going and going, and it seems to cope really well with a bit of neglect, which is great because hanging baskets can sometimes suffer from a bit of lack of watering. So I've got these, and I have also grown some nasturtiums from seed earlier in the year. But again, you can go to your local garden centre and buy nasturtiums. So I think most people will recognise the sort of pretty shape of the leaves on a nasturtium. They're that sort of circular shape, and they'll get bigger. And then they grow these kind of really pretty, brightly coloured, usually orange flowers, although I managed to find a rose variety, which I'm quite excited about this year, pink nasturtiums. And the bees absolutely love them. They fly in. These will trail over the edge of the basket as well. So you can find all sorts of different trailing plants in the garden centre, like fuchsias and verbena and lobelia. There's loads and loads of different trailing plants. So we're calling them the spillers. And then the final sort of plant we're going to include today are the fillers. So I have a bit of a mix here. This plant I have been holding on to. It's a cutting from last year. It's a coleus. And I just love coleus because they have these amazing brightly coloured leaves. And you can get all sorts of different colours like purple, lime green. So this is going to fill in the gaps around the edges and just kind of bulk up the pot a little bit. And I also have, what did I choose at the garden centre? I've got a calibracha here, and I've also got a verbena. So at the moment, these plants might not look like much, but give it a month and lots of watering and a bit of feeding, and they'll be full of flowers. So I'm just going to show you now how I go about making the hanging basket. So what I tend to do is fill up I've got a box of compost here, and I tend to fill the basket halfway up, first of all. So if you just make sure whoever is working on these baskets that they've got easy access to some compost just in a tray next to them. You might have to kind of change the height of the working station for different people. Some people might find this a little bit too high if they're not able to stand, so you can use a lower table. I've seen people sit with a hanging basket on their lap as well. So I'm filling the basket up halfway. And this is just multi-purpose peat-free compost that I am using. I'll fill that up a little bit more. We're getting there. So one other thing I was going to show you is that I sometimes like to add a little bit of a natural fertilizer to the compost as I'm doing it, just to give the plants the best possible start. Well, you don't have to do that because we will be kind of suggesting that you feed them throughout the summer. I use, now I don't know if my angle's right, is that the right way?
Yep, perfect.
Yep, I use this, it's called biochar. It's like a natural fertilizer. And what all you do is, you get a little spoonful of it. I've got a wee spoon, plastic spoons, I just keep them in the tub, and you just kind of sprinkle it over. The pot itself tells you the exact amount to use, but I've now kind of gotten the habit of knowing the number of spoons. You can add it as a top dressing as well, and that can be used for any plants really, including house plants. And that's lasted me ages now. I can't remember when I last had to buy one. So I'm just gonna make sure that that fertilizer is kind of mixed through my compost. So I'm looking for it to be about half full, so that when I put the plants in, I'm looking at the level of the top of the basket, and I'm aiming for the plants to be kind of just either just below or about level, just below ideally, so that when you water, the water's not then pouring over the top again. You want a kind of gap at the top, just the same as if you had a pot in a, I'll show you a pot. So like this plant here, you'll see, I don't know if you can see the watering line around the rim there. It's the same kind of idea. So you're aiming for a gap at the top, so it's not overfilled. So I think that's probably about right, actually. So I'm then going to place in my thriller plant. So this is this lovely pelargonium, which is going to have a kind of pinky, I don't know if you'll be able to see on the label, it's going to have a lovely kind of a pinky white sort of flower, and quite a lot of pelargoniums have a lovely smell as well. You can also take cuttings from them, which I love, and grow more little plants for free. So I've got my thriller in the middle, and I'm then going to put my spiller plants around the edge. So I'm keeping them in their pots right now, so that I can kind of get the placing right. For the spiller plants, you're wanting them to kind of cascade over the edge. So what you can do is sort of tip them slightly so they're facing out to the edge of the basket, and you can already start to see that some of the foliage is going to head over in that direction, and you can help it head that way. So that is one of my glaucomas. I was also going to put in some nasturtiums around the edges. So here is a little nasturtium that I popped out of its pot earlier. And that one's it's got a bit of a smaller root ball because I grew it at home. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of extra height with some more compost and pop that around the edge. So you're aiming for these to be kind of equally spaced around the edge. And I think I'm going to do 3 of the spiller plants. So you could do 3 completely different plants. You could do them all the same. You want to be having a think about maybe letting people choose plants according to what colours they like. Or even if possible, they could come with you to the garden centre to choose. So I've got my 3 spiller plants, and I'm now going to fill in around them while they're in their pots, and then that will give me the structure to be able to pop them back in again. So I'm just going to start filling in around these pots, making sure that the compost is kind of not quite to the top of the plastic pot, but pretty close, and that it's filled quite well, because once we put these plants in, we want them to the compost to have contact with the roots, so they can get all that goodness and water out of the soil. So I'm filling it all in. I always find with hanging baskets that they take more compost than you might imagine. They're actually this basket in is quite a big container. So make sure you've got lots of extra compost near you so you can top up people's trays if you need to. So I'm just filling in around this side here. People might need a bit of a hand with just making sure they've got enough in and they're not kind of covering up the plants. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. It's sort of firmed in around the pots. See there, I could feel a wee gap. So I'm just going to put a little bit more in. It's good to just use your fingers. People might want to wear gloves. I'm one of those gardeners that doesn't wear gloves often enough and then regrets it with my nails, but anyway. So that's now filled in around those pots, and I can see what I'm doing. So now I can lift them out, and I don't know if you'll be able to see because of the light, but there is a indentation left there from the plastic pot where I lifted that plant out. And that just makes it a lot easier now for me to hold the plant carefully, give it a wee squeeze and a little nudge and gently try and ease it out of its pot. And you're looking for plants to have a nice root ball like this. So that plant's definitely ready to get out into the container. I tend to give the roots a wee sort of separate out just to get them to sort of head off into the container rather than carrying on going round in circles, but that might just be me. And then you can just pop it back in the hole that it came from. And that's a really easy way to get it in. So I'm going to now, the nasturtium didn't have a pot, so it's in, but I'm going to do the same for the other two spiller plants now. I'm just going to ease them out of their container. So this one has got roots right over the bottom, definitely ready to get out. Sorry, plant. So you can see there are all the roots, definitely ready to get out. And again, that one is already, the roots have kind of come away because they came through the bottom of the pot, but in it goes, and just kind of firm it in. And then the same for the final spiller plant at the edge. So again, I'm just teasing it out and popping it into the hole. So when you're doing that, you can kind of make sure you're happy with the direction again, and you might have a part of the plant that's already cascading out. So this one was kind of naturally heading out this side. So I've tried to head it in that direction. Great. So now we want to add in the filler plants. And an easy way to do that is just to use a normal kind of kitchen spoon, because it's a little bit smaller and can allow you to get in between the plants. A trowel is good for the start of this project, but it can be a bit big for getting around the plants once they're in. So now I'm just going to dig 3 little holes for my filler plants and pop them in. So I'm just popping the compost over there, digging holes, and as I go, I can take the plant. This is my lovely Calibraca, which will have a beautiful, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, that way, am I this way, Joan? That's it.
That's it, perfect.
Yeah, that will have a beautiful purple flower. And some of these, I guess, could be spillers as well. So hopefully this will come over the edge a little bit too. So as I go, I'm checking, does the hole height feel about right for that plant? So that one needs to be slightly deeper to make sure it's not too raised above the lip of the container. And then again, I'm kind of firming it in, making sure that the compost is in all around the edges of that plant. And same again for my little verbena, which is going over here. I'm just digging a hole again. It absolutely poured with rain here last night, and I've had compost in a bucket at the back door, so my compost is a little wet. So I'm going to be extremely muddy after this. I'm just going to dig that hole slightly deeper. And pop that one in. So that one's already, I don't know if you can see that little flower just coming already, which is lovely. And again, I'm just firming the compost in around it. My nasturtium is already trying to climb out, it's attaching itself to something. And then I'm going to pop in my coleus. This coleus has been on the go since last year. I took it as a cutting from a coleus that I got from a garden centre and just kept it in a wee jar of water growing roots, and then potted it up and kept it over winter in my house. So they cope quite well outdoors in the summer, but they don't like to be outside over the winter. It's too cold. So hopefully this will have some roots on it. Oh yeah, we've got a few. That's good. A few little roots. I'm going to pop that one in as well. It's nice to see a bit of colour on it already. And then all I'm going to do at the very end is just go around with my spoon into the container and just top up the compost all around the plants so that I'm leaving a couple of centimetres at the top of the container. I don't know if you'll be able to see that there. There's a little gap at the top so that when I water everything in, the water stays in the container. Because that is one of the main challenges, I guess, or one of the main tasks with a hanging basket is keeping it watered on a really hot day. So I think we are just about there. I'm just going to check around this side. Again, firming in the compost all around. Yeah, I can see another wee gap. So sometimes people might need a bit of a hand with this last bit just to check that there is enough compost in, that there aren't any gaps around the plants. Because if there are, that'll cause them to dry out even more and their roots won't be able to spread through the container. And I think that is us. So I'll just lift it up a little bit. I don't know if you can see it very well.
Yeah, looks beautiful.
So that is our container. So the last thing you'd want to do, I'm not going to do it because I'm standing in my guest bedroom, is give it a good water. So you could either do that outside or over a sink, but you want to do it with a watering can that's got a rose on it so that you aren't damaging the plants or washing out the compost. And see, I've turned that around and noticed another gap. So that's another tip, is just to have a look at it from different angles and check that you've not missed any spots. And then once you've given it a water, I would keep it in a sheltered spot, depending on the time of year. So I'll try and keep this either indoors or in a greenhouse or in a cold frame, maybe until the sort of chances of frost have gone. And then I will get it outside and water it regularly. And once you start to see it flowering and the leaves growing, then you want to be starting to feed it every week. So you can choose the kind of feed you want to use yourself. You could buy this biochar. A lot of people will use things like Miracle Grow or tomato feed. There's all sorts of different ones you can get. And if you have a look in your local garden centre, the staff are always super helpful as well. They'll be able to give you some advice. And the final thing to do, just to keep your basket flowering for as long as possible, is to nip out any flowers that are starting to look a bit tired or that have died. So this geranium here has lost half of its petals. So to nip it out, I just get my nails onto my finger and just pinch it out like that. You could use little scissors or snips if you wanted to as well. And if you carry on doing that, it will just encourage the plant to put on more flowers and it will flower for longer over the summer. And I think that's me, Joan.
Great. Thank you very much, Emma. That looks very nice. I particularly like the coleus.
Yeah.
The little pink coloured, well, pinky purple coloured one. Yep, that's going to be nice when it's all, another few weeks, it'll be looking beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, I'll come back over.
Okay, thanks. So, thank you very much, Emma. I've got a question for you. I was writing in the names of the plants as you were talking about them. Now, what I call trailing Nepeta has changed its name, and is it glaucoma? Because I typed that in so that it's definitely, actually I googled it, so I did, and it's still known as trailing Nepeta. It depends on the nursery what labels they use. So how is
you see that?
GLECH? So yeah, that's what I thought it was spelled. Glaucoma. It's also trailing Nepeta, and that was a wee sort of like variegated trailing plant, the wee green trailing plant. Yeah. I don't want people getting confused. So glaucoma, trailing Nepeta, they're the same plant. they just, for some strange reason, they rename plants every so often, and I've no idea why, because they're still the same plant. But anyway, there we have it. So we did have a question, Emma, but you kind of answered it. It was like, can the basket be hung outside now? As the pelargonium, you know, it's a tender plant. I don't know if you want to speak a wee bit more about the care of them for the next few weeks until we know that the frost has passed.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I'm just checking.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I would tend to keep this plant in, well, I don't have a greenhouse. If you had a greenhouse, then that would be a great spot to kind of keep it protected from frost, but get it acclimatized to being outside. A cold frame would also be really good. You could also start taking it outside if you've got the time. You could take it outside in the day and bring it back in overnight. But what you're really trying to do is protect it from frost. And given that we're all in Scotland, I think we're not past that chance of frost yet. Well, I'm not where I am anyway. And the other thing about keeping it protected is that it just gives these plants the best chance to get going. If I put it outside now, it might get a bit of a fright and kind of just stop growing. Whereas if we keep it sheltered, then it can put the best growth on in its roots, because that's what we're looking for now. We won't see a whole lot happening on top. We want the plant to be getting its roots into that compost and getting really strong roots so that it can last longer over the summer period. So I would keep it protected if you can, in the best way that you can.
Great. Okay. I know you can buy horticultural fleece that if you don't have a greenhouse or even a shed at night time would be fine. And if you can't get a horticultural fleece, which you can buy in garden centres, even some like a dry tea towel or a pillowcase, something nice and light. If you just draped it over the plants, the foliage over the basket at night time, then that sort of increases the temperature in and around that area by 1 to 2 degrees, which can make all the difference to a young plant that is like us going up 10 degrees. So that's a little tip, that if you did want to get ahead and get your baskets planted up just now and you had nowhere to keep them safe at night time, if it's raining, it's not freezing. That's quite, that's like kind of rule of thumb at the moment for this time of year. So if it is very still and calm, that's when the temperatures could drop. Just cover them over with, as I say, a tea towel, a thin tea towel, not a towel, not a bath towel, and that'll just protect them by that degree or two.
The other thing that works quite well is bubble wrap. So if you're getting a package delivered and you've got some bubble wrap, as long as you weigh it down, you could even set it, down in a sheltered part just outside your back door with a bit of bubble wrap over it and a couple of rocks, and then lift it off during the day if you can. Yeah. You're just trying to keep that frost off of it. And I think, like someone mentioned in the chat there, cold frame. Cold frame is a good one as well if you have one, and they can be made quite easily from recycled things, or you can pick one up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we don't have any other questions in the chat. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and ask anything directly to Emma, or tell us what you have been doing in your garden? Everybody's quiet on us. Nobody wants to speak to us today, Emma.
Well, to be fair, someone's having a nice snack, so I don't blame them.
Yes, exactly. Well, what have I been doing in my garden? I have been potting up hanging baskets. We were doing a session yesterday for another organisation. It was tumbling tomatoes and strawberry plants. So I've got a whole, I grow all my strawberry plants in hanging baskets. So I don't grow any of them in the ground. I seem to have really good results. I don't have good results if I grow them in the ground, so I grow them in hanging baskets. So I've got tumbling tomatoes growing, I've got strawberries growing, I've got my summer bedding baskets planted up, waiting on warmer weather. So I'm doing that shufty at night time, as like, oh, it's going to be cold, covering them up, and then, oh, it's not going to be cold, that's fine. And they're in a really nice sheltered spot, and when the sun does come out, they're getting full sun, because we've got to remember that the summer bedding plants, these annual plants that are so readily available just now, come from countries that they grow naturally in other countries, not the UK, where they get sunshine and warmer weather as a granted, from March to September, October. They grow in climates that are a wee bit more warmer than ours. So we've got to be wary and be careful of looking after them. So we have a question: can tomatoes be outside in summer, or do they need to be in a greenhouse? Do I need specific varieties? Okay, in Scotland, most people would grow cordon tomatoes. That's your upright tomatoes, in greenhouses. Sheltered spot, possibly outdoors. I don't know, Emma, if you have much success with tomato growing.
I have always done the cordon tomatoes, so the bigger ones that wind up the string or a cane in a greenhouse, in different gardens that I've worked in, or a polytunnel. I have done the tumbling tomatoes, like I think you're about to mention. I've done them in baskets outside in a sunny, sheltered spot, and they've been pretty good.
Yeah, I grow, it's the tumbling varieties that I grow in my baskets. I do grow a couple of cordons, but they're indoors. Tumbling tomatoes do great outside, but again, they're in a sheltered, sunny spot. They do I give them as much sunshine. Tomatoes need about 6 to 8 hours sunshine a day, or in a position where they will get 6 to 8 hours of sunshine if the sun is out. The two varieties that I use of tumbling tomatoes are Cherry Falls and Tumbling Tom Red. But you get other ones, there's quite a few varieties out there, but they're the two that I grow that seem to do really well. Get about 60 to 80 tomatoes off of one plant. So I would recommend them if you can give them a hot spot outside.
And they work really well. I did them with a group once in the containers that you can buy that are plastic that hook over a fence.
Okay.
They're little plastic, excuse my hands, look at this. You can get them there, they come in all these bright colours like purples and pinks, and they're like a pot with a hook on it. So it's all one solid thing. And I grew tumbling tomatoes in them, and we had them all the way along the fence, a south-facing fence, and they were fab. So that worked quite well.
Yeah. And the tumbling tomatoes are so nice because they actually they fruit quite quickly, like quicker than your cordon tomatoes, and they really do. If you keep picking them, as soon as you've got a couple of red ones, pick them and eat them because they're just like sweeties. They're so sweet, and that does promote future flowering and continuous tomato fruit making for a longer period. So they're a lovely plant to grow on the patio because there's so much activity with them. So that's a good one. And Margaret is suggesting Ailsa Craig as a good one for outside. So that's one that grows as a cordon, providing it's in a sheltered spot. So yeah, and have somewhere where you can actually grow it up, be supported on a trellis or on a bracket coming out from the wall that you can attach a string or a cane to support it to grow upwards.
The other thing I've been seeing people do more of recently, given that we're trying to avoid, having to use water if we're not collecting it from our water, but is people doing hanging baskets with things like alpines and sedums in them. So they are kind of adjusted to the dry, hot conditions, and they could last years and years and years as well. So if you Google hanging baskets for alpines or sedums, you'll come across all these amazing pictures of different types of hanging baskets that they probably aren't as dramatic looking, covered in all the flowers, but they can be quite pretty with foliage, and they need a little bit less care as well, which is quite nice. You can also do things like ivy as well if you want something to last longer over the other seasons. I've still got an ivy that seems to just move from place to place to place wherever I go, and it survives just fine.
Great. Okay. Anyone else like to quiz Emma while we've got her gardening knowledge sat on a seat? Okay then. Well, if everybody's infoed out, that's great. I'll just wind up